Welcome everyone back to episode 2 of the Sko Buffs SportsCast. I am Harrison Simeon, joined by Leo Rivera, and a special guest today, our men's basketball beat writer, Liam Howard. How are y'all today?
Doing well.
Yeah, no complaints here, Harrison. Beautiful morning, and it's good to be chatting with y'all.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about, mainly the men's basketball game from last night, but then a huge development on the football side that happened just moments after we recorded our last episode, Leo. Plenty to talk about there. But Liam, you were there covering the game against Kansas last night, number 19 Jayhawks, and a loss Colorado didn't want to see once again. Their fourth straight in conference play. What did you see, Leo, that really made a difference in that game?
I
I
mean,
mean,
first and
Or Liam, pardon me.
there you go, Liam.
I think personally, this was a huge game about the three ball. Early in the first half for Kansas, especially, the three ball was falling with high efficiency, and for Kansas, that really stayed the course throughout the entire course of the game. The second half, it was falling just as efficiently, and then they limited Colorado at the perimeter past that point. Colorado had six three-pointers in the first half, but then finished the night 9 of 31 from three. And so that scoring inefficiency from the three-point line was huge. Also, a huge part of the game plan was shifted after Elijah Malone went down with an injury in the first half. He ended up going to the hospital, did not return to the game. So overall, the size mismatches, even if he wasn't necessarily providing the scoring that Colorado was hoping early on, that played them a serious disadvantage, and it changed Kansas's game plan. It ultimately shook up the game, and that second half was a much more defensive battle, and Colorado just wasn't able to keep up.
Leo, I know you were in attendance as well. What were your initial takeaways?
Definitely, I'm echoing those same things that Liam said. When Colorado comes out and they're firing from three in that first half, they were keeping it close. I mean, at halftime, the team's only down 2 points. But, the loss of Elijah Malone was definitely huge. It just changes up the spacing. You're having to play, Taco more minutes, who's, again, a very raw player. He's still trying to gain experience. He's only, been getting a handful of minutes when he has been playing. But, again, like Liam said, it always felt like Colorado was just coming up one play too short. Harrison. They would get the defensive stop they needed. It would seem like they could come get a shot to, cut it down to 1 point lead or even, tie the game up at certain points down the stretch, and they would just miss it. When they needed to hit a shot, they couldn't. No one was able to, take over in the clutch moments and kind of control this game. Sebastian tried, Isaiah tried, they were really aggressive down the stretch. I thought alone, McKaylee played really well. That's one player from my observation I thought played well, but ultimately the efforts just weren't quite enough.
Yeah, another thing that has been kind of a recurring trend for Colorado this season is losing the rebound battle, 45 to 33 last night in favor of Kansas. Liam, what has been, do you think it really just comes down to size and how Colorado struggled on the boards this year, or is it something more?
I do think it comes down to size, but I think it also comes down to the production you're getting out of the guys who are the bigger guys on the team. Elijah Malone, while I did mention that he creates a game plan issue for opposing teams, he has certainly struggled in the rebounding category. It was something early on in the season that the Buffaloes looked to him to be sort of their pillar of rebounding. He had an incredible first game against Montana State, and it looked like he was going to be that guy for them this season, but he sort of fell off of a cliff at a certain point in non-conference play, hasn't really come back around, and with your largest player being largely absent in the rebounding category, that is never going to play for the Colorado Buffaloes. Additionally, you've got guys like Ben Dak who had a solid night of rebounding this past night, but he's had some nights where he is also absent. Not much to hear from him. Sebastian Rancic, they definitely want to see more of him out of the rebounding category. So overall, for a team that preaches rebounding the way that Tad Boyle does, he has said that it is their Achilles heel. He said that last year's team, the Achilles heel was giving up the ball, turnovers, and this year it's rebounding.
Leo, anything to add?
Yeah, it's certainly a mentality thing. Like Leah mentioned, you have Sebastian Rancic, who is a 6'11" forward, and you have Bengot Dak, who's 7 feet. They have, sizable guys. It's just I don't know if they're necessarily physical enough or have the want to put their bodies on the line because these are offensive guys, right? They know their game is scoring the basketball, and that's what they provide to the team. So it's really hard sometimes when you have to kind of decide, do I really want to go up and take an elbow here, or get knocked off my feet potentially and lose even more time. But from what Tad Boyle has said all season long, and I know what Liam's been saying, it's definitely just got to be a mentality thing. At some point, you just have to turn it on and go get that ball.
Yeah, good points by both of y'all. Just looking at the upcoming schedule now, they've got UCF at home this Saturday, then Iowa State on the road, at home, and Baylor on the road. That's a crucial stretch heading into February as they really get into the meat of Big 12 play. Liam, what do you think are the biggest keys for this team to get those Big 12 wins back and truly make this year kind of a turnaround as it was looking like at the start?
Yeah, well, for Colorado, it's got to be about winning the games you're supposed to win. Those games to Cincinnati, West Virginia, those are games that this team would tell you they needed to win. If you're a Colorado team who is not going to be ranked this season and you're looking to play spoiler in the Big 12, you have to be able to beat those teams that you're supposed to beat and then be able to play spoiler against the higher ranked opponents. If you're going to be losing to the likes of Cincinnati and West Virginia, that's not going to take place. So it's got to be a win against UCF. It's got to be a win against Baylor. TCU has shown that they can be an incredibly tough team at times, so that won't necessarily be a given. But that's another game that I think this team would tell you they should win. The Iowa State game, obviously, road environment against a great team. That game is a bit of a long shot, but that is one that they could still win if they could build a little more momentum beforehand with a win over UCF.
Leo?
Yeah, building on what you said, Liam, I think it's also taking advantage of the home matchups, right? This Big 12 schedule is daunting. Anytime you can get, one of these top teams, you had Kansas in here last night, into your building with your crowd noise, using the elevation to your advantage, pushing the pace, the things Tad Boyle's talked about, all season, that's definitely going to be an advantage. But like you said, Liam, you got to continue to take advantage of these, lesser tier Big 12 teams. And again, we've talked about it. We need better play in, not we, they need better play in the paint. They need more aggressiveness and better defense there as well.
Yeah, individually, for me, I'm looking at Sebastian Rancic as a guy that really needs to step up in this next stretch because you look at the first two games where Colorado's won, he's got 19, 18 points. He's getting to the line, 14 free throws, 9 free throws. While maybe the shots haven't been falling for him for most of the season, he's been able to attack the basket and get his production out of that, and that's been a huge difference for the Buffs. But these last four, he's only had 2 free throws, 4 free throws, 3 free throws, and 0. And that's led to some of these poor shooting nights. He was 3 for 10 last night, 8 points, then 10, 5, and 13. So I think for Ranchich, he's a returner. He knows this offense better than anybody. I think he's really that key player. I mean, Dak has been playing pretty well. I think you're getting what you're asking for out of Bengot Dak right now if you're Tad Boyle, but you're looking for more out of Ranchich for me. So yeah, and anything more you guys wanted to add about the team? I know that this has been a kind of a roller coaster year at this point, and now we're in the kind of down slope of it. But I know there's still some positives you can take away.
Yeah, one positive I will add is that last night against Kansas, which is a very tough team, only 3 turnovers. That's a huge thing if you're Colorado to be able to limit those turnovers to just 3 against the number 19 team in the country. That is something that you can build on. And even though Tad Boyle's a guy who is very emphatic on no like pats on the back, no wins and losing, he was actually saying last night that that is something that this team can build on. That is something that they can that is a positive that they can build on and look at and be like, wow, that right there is how you take care of the basketball. And so that's something that they're going to look to do going forward, and that's them proving that they can do that against a ranked team.
Yeah, they just got to take it a game at a time, guys, right? This is a long schedule. It's a long season. It's easy to look ahead and see we have XYZ coming down the line, but just take it one day at a time for this team. One practice, one game on the road at home. I think if they do that, they should still be able to remain competitive and just, not lose sight of the individual goal. And I think, there's still plenty of time this season for Colorado to, put together some wins, of course, a conference tournament as well. So a lot of exciting things for Colorado basketball.
Yeah, Liam, to your point, as someone who covers the women's basketball team a lot, 3 turnovers is to die for. I don't think that will ever happen with how the women's basketball team is constructed as it is. But yeah, that's an extreme positive, and I think overall this season we've have seen so many strides out of these Buffs, and while they're young, they're still figuring things out. They're gonna struggle on the road as all Colorado teams do. That they've been able to have some of these nice moments where they're playing above their pay grade in a way, and I think that will definitely, if the team can gel together, and Isaiah Johnson, guys like Alon Michelle can stick around. I think that'll be important going into the future. But yeah, I just didn't want to move into football. Just wanted to make a pivot, and then we're going to pivot back to basketball towards the end because we had one huge storyline come up on Tuesday. We recorded our podcast on Monday, then posted it after the news broke. But Jordan Seaton, Colorado's arguably best player from last season,
Yep.
has entered the transfer portal in stunning fashion. He allegedly used a creative team video that was supposed to be utilized him coming back to then say he's hitting the portal. Pretty crazy stuff. And now he's in a bidding war with Oregon, LSU, Texas, and all that. But Leo, what do you think?
Miami.
Who do you think he's going to? You think Miami?
Well, I think, it's got to be a team somewhere in the South, Harrison. I just think, there's no way he goes to Oregon. I don't think that fits Jordan Seaton. He's going to go to a blue chip team that's going to be able to get him the eyes needed to go to the NFL. He wants to play against a top tier talent. And what I presume should be the SEC. I see him being a SEC type player and going to build up his resume, which he's already got his name out there these past 2 seasons at Colorado, obviously with the commitment from ING, coming in as the number one rated tackle prospect. You know how much he took on the brand of Colorado and represented Coach Sanders. So this is a huge loss, and I just really don't see Colorado replacing him at all this season. I know they're going to have someone there at left tackle, but it's not going to be Jordan Seaton. You're not going to be able to make up that leadership, the character, the passion that he plays with. But you just got to say, best of luck because 2.5 million is something Colorado does not have.
Do you think it just came down to money, or was there something more to it, you think?
Well, I don't know, Harrison, because you'd think it has to kind of just be a money thing because it seems like the relationship with Seton, Colorado, is still well. All right, like his cousin just committed to the university
Yeah.
a couple days ago, which is very interesting as well, considering Seton was one of the people kind of pushing and recruiting him to get to Colorado. So it seems like there's still that respect there. And Seton, said in his goodbye post that Colorado will always be his second home or one of his homes. So I think it's interesting that he is leaving, but I think it's got to be money. It's always about the money.
Liam, did you have anything to mention on that?
Yeah, I will say one thing, as much of a gut-wrenching feeling as this is for Buffs fans, I think that if you're Jordan Seaton, you can't entirely say that you got better this season. I think that this coaching staff did not necessarily improve him. And as a guy who is looking to go to the NFL, you're looking to see that steady improvement every single season. And it can become a bit concerning if you go a full season and you're like, okay, I'm about where I was at the end of last year. That I don't know if this is the right fit for me. So overall, I think that the relationship may have been good, and I think that he could have had a great relationship with the coaches, could have still been encouraging his brother to come to the school, but it genuinely just might have come down to obviously money, that is a huge deal, but at the same time, him just having that self-reflection of I didn't improve this season.
Yeah, I look at both of what y'all said. I think the timing of it came down to money because we were already, a week and a half into the portal being open and, nothing happened. We were assuming that Seaton was going to return, but then you see that out of nowhere and then you think of the real reasons why this might have happened. And you think of him missing the last 3 games due to injury and it not really, it sort of looking like, he's not playing because the team's not playing well. And that is often something that people thinking about the portal do. So I think it comes down to money in that timing aspect. I know he took a long visit to LSU and then went to Atlanta, and now Dan Lanning went down there, and so he's having his visit with Oregon there. It's a little strange. It's a very much a developing situation, but I think he's looking at teams that can both pay him the biggest bag and also get him to the NFL. So I think both of those things came into play for him. But yeah, now looking at Colorado's roster and how they've kind of reeled from this invaluable loss, Who are you looking to on the roster, Leo, to replace that production? Or maybe not replace it, but recreate it?
This one's going to be interesting, Harrison. I think, the spring game's going to be really pivotal this year, and that's actually something I'm really looking forward to because, they have a few different tackle options who've kind of been able to swing both ways. That's kind of what it seems like the theme is during this portal acquisition is they're getting offensive linemen who've had experience on both sides of the ball. So I think potentially they're just going to kind of plug and play whoever the best tackle comes out to be, which I'm not sure right now at this point. You have so many guys from, different schools, and it's hard to kind of compare, especially at the offensive line level. Because one thing about, the lower division, college football programs is the skill players are all going to be the same. Your skill positions out wide are all going to be, basically the top tier D1 players. There's just so many of them. But the offensive linemen, the trenches, that's where you really see the biggest difference in football. So it's going to be, interesting. Bo Hewley, who you brought in from Georgia, not a lot of experience over the past couple of years, right? Only played 2 games and he kind of struggled, but that is a bigger SEC name. He's got experience against bigger people. You also brought in that tackle from Cal, which is going to be interesting as well. I'm not sure. I think he only played a couple snaps at left tackle, if that, but it's going to be interesting to see. Or, I know the portal's not, I don't know what other names are out there, but there is still a chance you bring in another guy.
Liam, was there anybody that stood out to you that Colorado brought in that could potentially take up Seaton's spot?
I'm happy you mentioned Bo Hewley. I mean, we're talking about the SEC, and the Buffaloes did go after a couple of SEC talents, and while they are raw prospects, that's still guys who've had reps in the SEC, and SEC pass rush is not something you can really recreate anywhere else in college football, except maybe the Big Ten this season. That was a pretty lethal conference for pass rush. But, I mean, yeah, you obviously mentioned Bo Hewley. Javen Richardson from Missouri is another guy that they could potentially move over there. It really is going to come down to, like you said, Leo, who's playing the best week in and week out. This could be a very much a rotating squad. This could be a different offensive line every single week of this season if they're not able to find their guys that are consistent and can consistently provide protection for this run game for the and provide good pass protection. So I think that they're going to be looking for those guys who can go a little step above beyond their raw talent to this point and just string it together a little more consistently. But lots of talent bought in from the portal, so lots of opportunities to find that player.
Liam, I'm only shaking my head because I completely agree with you. I do see this as a scenario where this offensive line could be rotating very heavily. And that's what sucks about losing Jordan Seaton because you've had a guy who you know is going to be your left tackle for the past 2 seasons. He blocked for Shador Sanders and shown his capabilities in pass protection. And to lose that, and now you're going to we might have to rotate guys. It sucks. It really does. But I think that's where Colorado needs to use the spring game in the springtime to really try to figure that out and, throw as many lineups, as many rotations of offensive linemen as possible during these early days, especially with Deion Sanders being around the program this spring and, healthy to actually observe and be there and witness the character. That's why I think it's going to be a big change from last season.
Yeah, I like Hewley. I like Bell, Leon Bell, from Cal. I like Taj White from Rutgers as well. I
Oh,
think he
Taj
got
West
some
is a great addition. I really
he got
like
some
Taj White.
solid Big Ten experience. But here's my take. You don't have to replace him. And I think y'all kind of hinted at that because we may not see one person stand out above the rest. But with Brennan Marion coming in, you have an offense that may not even quite cater to what Seaton does best, which is pass protect, work in the pocket. And I think when you look at Colorado's offense next year, you're going to see way more run than I think we imagine. I think even though maybe the depth in the running back room leaves some to be desired, they just added some names, some younger talent. But I think you might see those Sacramento State backs, Damian Henderson, Jaquale Smith, get involved a lot more than we think alongside Michael Welch. And I think that will be the biggest difference from last year to this year, and I think that will can sort of, you know, quell the loss of Seaton because he was never, a rugged run defending left tackle. I mean, that's not even really what you ask out of most left tackles. That's your
True.
blindside blocker. That's the guy that you have spending 5 days out of the week with your quarterback and develop that relationship so they know all their tendencies and protect their blind side. But next year, I think you're going to see a lot of pocket movement. I think you're going to see a lot more creativity on ways you can get the ball out quickly in addition to leaning on that run game. So I think overall, I see this as a very significant loss if Colorado is going to go and go to the drop back pass game. But I also see it as a way where it's not maybe won't hurt the offensive production entirely if that go-go that Brennan Marion instills can work out and work against different teams in the Big 12.
One
That,
key
that's a,
thing to note there as well, sorry, Leo, with
very
the
good.
portal is they brought in a lot of very crafty slot receivers, a lot of shorter guys who can kind of get lost behind that offensive line, including Ernest Campbell, who was actually part of that go-go offense last season. These are guys that he is liked to use in that backfield. Obviously, the Buffs used wide receivers in the backfield a little bit this season, not to much effect, but Brennan Marion has a lot of success when using guys back there. Campbell, as an example, the guy he ran a 10.02 it was a 10.02 100-meter dash at Texas A&M. It was tied for their record in school history, and it translates to a 4.21 40-yard dash. This may be the fastest player in college football that they acquired in Ernest Campbell, and him alongside several of the other slot receivers that they've got who are also ridiculously fast. Maybe just don't have the exact numbers written down to say it on paper, but incredibly fast receivers who are going to, like you said, Harrison, play into that go-go offense incredibly well. It might not need Seaton and that pass protection.
But yeah, I'm glad you guys brought up the point of Brandon Marion because that is also going to be a big difference why there could be a rotation in this offensive line group with how quick the tempo is and how much you're applying pressure in the run game and going, right? I think that could be, a result of where you want to rotate some guys, get some fresher, looks in, or potentially even some smaller offensive linemen who are quicker and can get out and block on those screen passes, go out and, make athletic plays. Because in Marion's offense, you're going to need some offensive linemen who are really in shape and really top notch to be for it to be successful.
Yeah, and I think an evergreen factor is like as long as you can wear out a defensive line, no, it doesn't matter how talented they are, you're going to be able to get the ball out. And I
Yep.
think with a fast-paced offense that can utilize both the run and the pass and keep things balanced so that they keep moving, they stay on the field, they limit the defense's ability to substitute, you're going to see pretty worn out defenses on different drives. So unless
Have
you
to.
have a very early down sack or something like that, you're going to have, a downhill approach to your offense that keeps defenses tired and that's how you win. And I think that can work also with, we've talked about Colorado and the altitude and everything like that. And Folsom has been a pretty formidable home field advantage. We've never seen Colorado get blown out other than that Arizona game at home in the Coach Prime era. So I think, yeah, I think that could be a huge factor that maybe we're not talking about with Brennan Marion's offense that could end up working out even with the loss of Seaton.
Certainly.
So yeah, just looking at these last couple of transfers that Colorado's gotten, I know that they went a little bit more on the offensive end. They brought in a new running back from Alabama, Richard Young. They brought in a couple of defensive backs that I kind of talked about maybe had needed some work. They brought in Jaja Boyd from now national championship winning Indiana. Jason Stokes, a freshman from Utah. And then another D lineman, he was originally committed to Baylor, Samu Taumanu Pepe. Or I believe he was at Baylor and then committed to Florida
Florida.
is what happened. So he's a huge defensive tackle, 376 pounds. And going back to Ernest Campbell, I think my one concern with him is the weight. He's 5'9" and 145. So they've found all shapes and sizes. But Leo, who of these some of these last finishing touch transfers that Colorado's gotten, who kind of stands out?
Yeah, I think Stokes from Utah was a big acquisition there. Harrison, you talked about, getting more corner depth, and I agreed with you on that one. That was definitely an area of need going out and getting that. You talked about the defensive lineman. He interested me just because of the fact that he hasn't played too much, right, over the last 3 seasons, Harrison, but he's been developing. He's there. And he's just a big body. All right. Sometimes you just got to throw someone in at nose tackle. Colorado got ran up and down last year. We know exactly how that happens. But sometimes you just need bigger bodies to go in there and fill a hole. Hey, grab two guys, bring them down with you. Our linebackers are coming in behind. They're going to fill. So that just makes me, excited to see what his potential role could be. But they have also had just so many nasty D linemen now and so many different diverse players who can rush the passer, who can stop the run, who can impact the game with their hands at the line of scrimmage. That it's going to be hard if we get in the rotation.
Leo?
Yeah, I gotta say, I love the way that this linebacker room is looking. They killed it in the portal with these linebackers. Leona Lufau out of Texas is he's the headliner, obviously. He's a four-star transfer prospect, 138 tackles at Texas this past season. But then alongside him, you got the likes of Tyler Martinez, who he was injured last season, but the year before that, this is an all-conference USA type of player, and he was developing in the right track to be a serious Mike linebacker, something that Colorado needed. And then, of course, Gideon ESPN Lamprin from Bowling Green, one of the greatest middle names in all of college football, but also just a very stout tackler and just another guy that Colorado desperately needed this season. That is something that the Buffaloes struggled with, was just sure tackling. And a lot of times, if guys got to the second level of that defense, they were going to run for a long way before they were actually tackled by Tawfiq Bayard usually. So this is going to be a huge. I think that linebacker room is going to play a huge role in replacing the loss of Bayard, but also just increasing the sure tackling that that team did not have last season.
Yeah, they need to get that right this year. I think that was a huge difference in 24 when the defense improved. I talked about it ad nauseum in some of my writing and how Bentley and Hill Green were the key to that defensive success. Now looking to maybe make up for the misses of last season when you bring in Martavius French, Reginald Hughes, that didn't work out. So going to some different areas, try to find some success there. Leon Lefau from Texas is the most headlining addition, but Martinez and Lamprin is good additions as well. But of these last few, I really like what Colorado did on the interior, the offensive line. They brought in two guys that I could see potentially starting at center or guard, Demetrius Hunter from Houston and Sean Kinney from Lafayette. Kinney was one of the best interior offensive linemen in FCS. I know it's FCS again. We talk about the difference between FCS and that jump and how difficult it is to make. But Kenny was a beast on the interior. Played some center, played some guard, and he only allowed a couple of pressures all season. And Demetrius Hunter, a guy that you could immediately plug and play as your starting center, has tons of experience at Houston last year as their starter. And then I also look at there's one more I was missing, and then I did want to mention Jose Soto. I know he didn't last
Have
time,
to.
a guy that is going to immediately fit into that go-go offense really well, a potential starter as well. And then I had it right in front of me. Their interior offensive line. Oh, the cousin
College
of
White.
Jordan Seaton.
Oh yeah.
Javon McFadden from Ohio State. I know he hasn't played, but he was a four-star recruit. I mean, you're bringing in a guy that was a four-star recruit, spent a year in an Ohio State locker room that had, obviously was loaded. So he was never really going to get a chance that early unless he was a five-star like Seaton was. But he's, has some of the genes in there and has had a very successful high school career. So this is a guy that I think could fit in well, if not this year, then in the future. And so I think looking at that interior offensive line, I feel a lot more confident, even if the Buffs aren't able to get Zarian McGill back with that eligibility. That would be a huge, a huge returner. I mean, no questions asked. But still, I think that group can remain viable. That was another one of my somewhat concerns last week when we talked about what they had in the portal. You still have Yaya Atia, you still have Chauncey Gooden, so a mix of youth and experience, but I think the group just has so much more to it where you can mix and match and find those a better three of those interior along with your tackles, which still have some question marks like we've said, but the O-line looks solid. I still think even without Seaton, it could be solid.
Yeah, I think the interior is really good, Harrison. Like you said, I think there's going to be, four, maybe five guys who could legitimately start and be full-time starters in that. And, Demetrius Hunter was one of those big names as well. I thought coming over, I'm like, if Zary Miguel's not back, he's instantly, going to be the starter. Throw the Kenny over that guard. That's going to be nasty. That is going to be dirty. They can, combo run right up the middle behind those two all day, every day. But like you said, Harrison, this group's, forming out to be pretty nice inside.
Yeah, and I think that can help with some of the running back, possible things because Richard Young, while he's coming from Alabama, he's not experienced. He's only had a couple games under his belt. And then you look at the room and you still think Michael Welch is probably the lead back here. And that's, still, I mean, I like Mike Welch a ton. It's not, but maybe it's not the lead back you think of a college, premier college program. Though I think he has the potential to become one for sure. I don't want to disrespect Michael Welch. He was one of my favorite players on the team last year. I don't want to say that.
Certainly.
But I think they have a multitude of options, and you're going to keep them fresh while also keeping the offensive linemen fresh with the go-go and things like that, where they're able to get downhill and they're able to get really physical. The size looks great. I don't think you have to really worry about focusing on this winter. I know they're back at winter workouts of getting a lot of these players stronger and more conditioned. I think you see a lot of those guys that are going to be ready from the jump. And I think that will be a huge benefit to installing some of the schemes and the systems that Brennan Marion and Coach Prime wants to carry out next season. So, anything else on football that y'all wanted to discuss? I know that might be it for now. We're approaching the big lull. I know that because then once they kind of add all their transfers, we just kind of wait till the spring game.
Hmm.
Certainly.
But yeah, I did want to get into one last thing about the women's basketball team because they picked up a huge. Oh, actually, we may have to pause that for a moment. I think the Big 12 schedule came out.
The
Mm.
football? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I was gonna ask about that as well because I know that was coming out today.
Yes. Let me take a look right now. So just instant reactions. If I wanted to pull that up.
I'm trying to find it. I got Colorado schedule right here.
So they opened Big 12 play at Baylor in Waco, rematch with Draylon Miller, dealt off DJ Lagway at
Yep.
quarterback, and then at home Texas Tech on a Friday.
That game's gonna be big. Home against Utah. I mean that's a back-to-back games of just you better buckle up your chin strap right there. Those are gonna be exciting. At
Yeah,
Oklahoma State. Should be nice.
yeah, you get to see what they have and their new system. Drew Mestamaker, another big addition in the quarterback department for the Big
Yep.
12. I'm curious what does Arizona State do at quarterback next year? Have y'all seen any developments there?
Yeah, they were getting I thought they had a visit from a I don't remember the player's name, but I thought they were looking at getting a guy pretty much in if they didn't sign him already.
Yeah, I think they might be going from like in-house, not Jeff Sims, but
They got a couple guys. They got Cutter Boley, who was at Kentucky, played a little bit there, and then they also got Mikey Keene from Michigan, who was pretty good at Fresno State before he transferred to the Wolverines. Pretty experienced starter there, and also played some time at UCF. So a couple experienced guys in that room.
so yeah, as I mentioned, at Baylor versus Texas Tech on a Friday, then you have one bye week all season. Then you go at home against Utah, at Oklahoma State, Kansas State at home for the upteenth time, at Arizona State. They've played them over and over, as well as Utah, I
Mhm.
mentioned. At home against Houston, at Cincinnati, and at home against UCF to close out the year. So, do we have any quick, instant record predictions as the roster's kind of rounded out right now? Do we have anything that you can take away? I know the non-conference schedule was at Georgia Tech versus Weber State, and then at Northwestern in their first game of their new
New
stadium.
stadium. Yeah,
This will be a fun
that's gonna be cool.
non-conference.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech on the road is gonna be tough. I mean, damn, to open up your schedule, that one's gonna be extremely hard to win. We saw how that one shaped out at home for the Buffaloes this past year. I don't like their chances on the road, but that is to be seen. Um, with that, I do like a lot of the road opponents aren't horribly hostile road environments, just typically, which I think is good for Colorado's schedule. But I see probably about three conference losses just looking at the schedule right now so far. I could potentially see him, drop in a Texas Tech, a Utah. I mean, Kansas State's always tough against Colorado for whatever reason. They play Colorado tough. You're on the road or you're at home for that one, but potentially on the road at Arizona State as well. It's just it's a tough schedule.
Liam?
Yeah, I think that this team is looking at maybe an 8 9-win ceiling at this point. I think that that would be the ceiling. I could also see this team going 5 or 6 wins. I think that it's probably going to be more around the 7 range. This is a team that I think will make a bowl game. I think this is a bowl team right here, and especially with a pretty easy non-conference schedule, all things considered, especially with Weber State, Northwestern. But there's a lot of winnable conference games on this schedule. Like you said, Leo, not all that crazy of road environments, but definitely some wild cards in there, some teams that were really reconstructed by the transfer portal. So a little hard to tell as of right now.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at the opening schedule is really tough. The first 6 games as a real testing point of this team because if you go 1-2 in non-con and maybe Northwestern is a little bit better on the road and it's a Big Ten team, I don't think Coach Prime in their in his tenure they've played a Big Ten team and played that style. So you're gonna possibly be staring the barrel of 1-5 down in your first. If you can consider that possibility. But for me, I'm keeping my ceiling high and my floor low. So I think there's a lot of room for Colorado to find that middle area, and I think they can scrounge up 5 or 6 wins right now. At least that's how I'm looking at it. I don't have too optimistic of a viewpoint right now. I think that might change heading into spring ball because I just haven't seen any of these players play together.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest difference for me, the biggest X factor of this entire team is how Brendan Marion's offense works. Because if it does, then you don't need superstars. You don't need Shador or Travis anymore to find success on the offensive end. And then the defense was yet to be seen, but I think they've definitely made improvements to a lot of those position groups. So the I think they could definitely find their way above the 5-6 little area I've set for them. But with that really tough opening schedule, it's going to be that's going to be the real measuring stick is if they can go on the road to Georgia Tech, play well, then come home, do your get right game, and then go on the road and beat Northwestern, then that changes my perception of them going into conference play dramatically. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about this schedule, but we'll maybe save a little bit more of a deep dive for next week, as we'll hopefully have some special guests coming up, but we'll definitely get more into that schedule. But lastly, just wanted to really quick shout out the women's basketball team, pulled off a big upset win over Iowa State, number 19 in the nation, or number 19 in the nation last Wednesday, and they unfortunately went on the road to UCF and then suffered a one of probably their worst losses of the year so far. So they've had a very inconsistent season. Liam, and how you've been following them? How closely have you been following them, and what have you seen from this team that maybe indicates who they are?
I certainly haven't been following them as close as the men's team, but I will say that both of these teams share a very similar trait, and that is sort of a Jekyll and Hyde type of appearance when it comes to some of these games. They'll show up to some of these games like the Iowa State game, and they will play their best basketball for a full 40 minutes, and it will look consistent. They'll find their rhythm, and it'll win them big games. It'll show that they have the capability to beat teams like that. And so that makes you a little optimistic when you go down the stretch and you look at especially that back-to-back matchup of West Virginia followed by TCU. Really tough 2 game stretch there for the women's team. But then they go and they lose the game to UCF, and you have to think, okay, is this team legit? Is this team for real? So I think that both of the teams sort of share that same like Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes they show up, they're ready to play, they play a full 40-minute game, and they show what they can be. And then other times they come out, they fall flat on their face. You question the preparation, and you question how is this team going to be moving forward.
Yeah, Colorado has been winning in every fourth quarter of their losses. So you have to look at the late game scenarios as the biggest part of what is holding this team back right now. And that starts with coaching. That starts with, I talked to, or I saw that J.R. Payne talked to Mark Johnson about this, kind of trend, and she's saying like, oh yeah, it's the players that I'm putting out there that have got us this lead, and now in the fourth quarter they're not playing the same way. So I think that comes down to coaching and comes down to how you prepare for when the going gets tough, especially on the road where Colorado has struggled forever, and especially these last couple of these seasons. That really have to come down to you have a big stretch coming up against Oklahoma State, and then you go on the road to play the Kansas schools. That is huge if you can pull off 2 wins there. Both teams have been struggling out in Kansas, the Wildcats and the Jayhawks. So big stretch there for the women's team. But that is about all I had to say today. If you all had any more to add on any of those teams, I know we got to kind of get going soon.
Yeah, we'll
Uh,
wrap it up,
we're
Harrison, but I'll
recording
just
it bright
say
and early.
this women's team definitely, roller coaster of emotions. I think the Iowa State win was good for confidence, but that was also a team who's going on a skid. Like they're not even ranked
Right.
anymore. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. But I think, like I said about the men's team, they just got to keep taking it one practice, one game at a time.
Agreed. Well, thank you guys all for listening. Episode 2 of the Sko Buffs SportsCast is complete. It's 2026. Next week we'll be back, hopefully with a special guest. We'll definitely get some more of those down the line. Maybe bring you some athletes, some coaches, everything from around the ecosystem of Colorado sports. So for Liam Howard, Leo Rivera, I'm Harrison Simeon, and you heard it here first.